that?
People sometimes use these terms interchangeably, and people like me, they have a very specific meaning. Psychometric is a particular kind of assessment. A general assessment could measure everything from classical IQ to personality traits. You can also assess the weight of your dog. Assessment itself is just a general measurement or an evaluation. It can be based on qualitative information or quantitative.
Hi, I'm Gustavo, and I bring you today's topics related to human resources, career management, and business. Welcome to HR Talent and Insiders with me, Gustavo Serbia. In today's episode, we discuss psychometric assessments with Dr. James Houran.
This is my little show, my little opportunity to, this is my hobby, it's my opportunity to talk to people that have, I believe, interesting information to share, which is why you're here. So first and foremost, thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I love talking about these things.
Yes.
I find that people don't talk about them often enough.
I know. And the problem with me is that I can go very easily on long conversations about this. One of the things that I know about me through assessments, which is the topic that we're going to talk about, is the fact that I, have this paralysis by analysis side. I'm very analytical. I love numbers, but I'm not a numbers guy necessarily. And when I start these conversations about the psychology of human behavior, candidates and how they would fit, I can go so many angles. I'm hoping to clarify perhaps some myths, but, have an honest conversation about what assessments are and what assessments are not. But let me properly introduce you. Today we have James Houran, Dr. James, or Dr. Houran, Ph.D., who's a managing director at Aethos Consulting Group. I've known you now for maybe 4 years.
It's been a while.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And in the companies that I've worked, Jim has come and pitched their tool, the 2020 assessment. But before we get started, I just want to give you a moment to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, sure. Well, my day job is I'm an organizational psychologist, and that includes working with assessments and other types of profiling tools, but also I'm an advisor. So my job is to work with companies to help them get better. That could mean better strategically, better through organizational dynamics and just team building, or it could be very specific individuals need some coaching and development. So I deal with numbers, but I also deal with people that are human beings. So I have both sides. I'm an academic and a practitioner all in one. And I'm interested in real world psychology. I have a lot of eclectic interests, but they all come down to understanding how real people in the real world are really motivated. So I'm very outcomes driven. I'm very pragmatic. I'm not one of those psychologists that's talking just theory. I want to bring it down to brass tacks, which is why I'm here today.
Perfect. I'm actually, as I was listening to you, I do take notes as I'm having conversations with my guests, but I was actually looking for my assessment, my 2020 assessment, which was done, I don't know if it was done 2 years ago or prior to that. But, I've been fascinated by these. But I guess where I want to start is as you and I were exchanging emails prepping, you made the distinction, or you wanted to make the distinction between an assessment and psychometrics, and that psychometrics can be assessments, but assessments are not necessarily psychometrics.
Oh, that's
Tell me
right.
about that.
People sometimes use these terms interchangeably, and to people like me, they have a very specific meaning. A psychometric is a particular kind of assessment. You are measuring psychological characteristics, traits, and tendencies. A general assessment could measure everything from classical IQ to personality traits. You can also assess the weight of your dog. Okay, so assessment itself is just a general measurement or an evaluation. It can be based on qualitative information or quantitative. A psychometric assessment is a quantitative evaluation of traits and tendencies.
So the 2020, which is how I got to know you, because we were considering the 2020, I think the 2020, I think Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group was using it or had another tool called the 2020. I'm not sure. But I remember the 2020 when I was with Mandarin Oriental. Is that the same?
It was. Yes. The
Yes. Yeah.
20 skills. Yes.
So the
Mandarin is a long-time
2020,
client. Yes.
yes. So the 2020 is a psychometric assessment. Is that the
Correct.
appropriate terminology?
Yes, it is.
Yep. So when I'm looking at my results, why are assessments, specifically psychometric assessments, so valid and important as part of, for example, the selection process?
Well, okay, that's a big question. Let me break it down. Let me ask you a question. I'll reply with a question. I'll be that cheeky. Gustavo, you mentioned you're looking at your results from, say, 2 years ago.
Yep.
Have you in any significant way changed in your professional capabilities, knowledge, or temperament in the past 2 years?
No.
You would say no.
No.
Okay.
I think the core of who I am is who I am. I make adjust certain things, but I think the core of who I am is who I am.
Well, the core of who you are, and the way I think you're meaning it, is like your attitude, your worldview, your temperament, how you're hardwired. But that's personality traits. Okay. Now, personality traits are not always the best predictor of outcomes in professional settings. In fact, research is pretty clear on this. It's an inconsistent predictor. And this makes sense if you think about it, Gustavo. I know introverts and I know extroverts, just like you do. And guess what? They both can tie their shoes and ride a bike. So personality traits don't always tell you what someone can do as far as their tactical work, or what they can do as far as relating to people, or how they think and act on information. Now, can personality tell me what type of shoe you might buy? How fast you might ride your bike? Sure. How you go about executing an attitude or behavior? Yes. But whether you have a certain capability, you would never want to use a personality test to predict that.
Oh.
Not only is it inconsistent, it also opens up risk issues, because certain personality traits, by definition, they're out of your control. It's how you're hardwired. Personality, by definition, is stable for about a 45-year period, starting in early adolescence. So unless you have a brain injury or a brain disease, you're right, Gustavo, how you are is just how you are. But most people would actually answer to my question to you originally. Yes, they've changed in 2 years. Who they were as a professional, how savvy they are with people, how they think on information, how they go about their work. Most people do develop in those areas over time, either just naturally through maturing in a role or in their career, or they've been through some sort of dedicated training, coaching, development, or maybe continued education. So how you are as a person, personality-wise, yes, that stays consistent over time, but your professional skills doesn't just stay stagnant. Otherwise, none of us would be part of a succession planning program.
So I'm glad that you actually articulated that way, because it's not the way that I was thinking about it. So where did I go wrong in thinking that I haven't changed? What is it that I'm considering that you are looking at that I wasn't?
Well, most people intuitively, whether you're in HR or not, most people intuitively think that, oh, if I'm going to interview Gustavo for a job, they go by the first indicator that we all have in ourselves. Do I like this person? Does this person seem relatable? Do they seem similar to me? Because if person seems likable, relatable, and similar, we think they're a good candidate. Check the box. Because if you're similar to me, I don't know anyone that would say that they're an okay employee.
Yeah.
I'm an average intellect.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of weird. Organizational psychologists have been laughing about this forever, but if you take a poll in the general population and ask people how intelligent they are, all of them say they're above average.
That's right.
Not everybody's above average, right? So most people instinctively think in terms of abilities, in personality terms, not in skills, abilities, and knowledge areas. But that's how I&O psychologists think of things. Okay, so I would be very surprised, Gustavo, if you were the exact same person, professionally 2 years ago than you are today?
So when you articulate it in that manner, I would agree. I mean, listen, every job that I've encountered has presented a set of challenges, and I've had to figure out a way to navigate it. So yes, when you put it in that context, I go, of course I have changed, I have evolved, I have grown. I don't necessarily go straight for certain things. Now I may go in an angle because I've learned,
Yes.
right? It's the typical
Right.
life lessons. But I think my response is probably reflective of probably many people out there, which is you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And therefore, if I'm looking at your personality and that's a personality that I don't like, then I don't want it. So why is it wrong in terms of looking at assessments and talk about personality?
Well, I'm not going to say here that personality plays no role or
Got
that
it.
you could entirely take personality out of the equation. Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. Okay. But the things that makes a person successful in a professional setting, where oftentimes you're not making decisions based out of what you personally would do or what your personality would motivate you to do. Companies have rules. They have a corporate culture. They have rules of the road in terms of mission, vision, core values. So to some extent, everybody is playing a role when they're at work. You filter information, you have to behave a certain way. You dress probably a little bit different in a professional situation than if you were at home on the couch watching Netflix, okay? So the skills that make a person successful in professional environments are not the same skills that relate to personality traits. Instead, professional performance is dictated by 3 aspects of a person. And these aspects can be trained. You said you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I would respectfully disagree, at least in terms of professional capabilities. I find in my executive coaching work that people can change on various things and they can change all the time. If you take ego issues out of the way, people can be open to learning all new sorts of things. Okay, but we're talking about how a person goes about tactical work. You weren't born knowing how to work on efficiencies and effectiveness. You had to learn skills, traits, and process. Nobody was born being the most socially savvy person on the planet. No, a person might be born as more extroverted or introverted, but you have to learn emotional intelligence. You're not just gifted with that. It's a skill that takes development, and not just in the classroom. You have to put it into practice in real world environments. Decision making. No one is born with great critical thinking and numeric reasoning. Those are skills that have to be developed. So the actual things that predict workplace performance are skills that certain personality traits might help you with, might load the dice for your success. But if you're going to rest on just natural ability, you will lose to the person that is more motivated to learn and to practice skills related to execution, people skills, and cognitive skills.
So let's talk about skills then, right? So
Yes.
we're moving away from personality.
Yes.
The way that I was thinking of personality is the totality of what you bring to the table. It's not just one aspect or another. Am I correct in thinking that?
There's a lot that goes into a person's, let's call it personal profile.
Mm-hmm.
Their profile is their entire person, personal and professional. Personality is a component, but it does not define the entire mosaic that is a person. No.
So obviously part of that are behaviors. What is the link between behaviors and skills? Is there a relationship between those two?
Absolutely. Skills are just behaviors. And we oftentimes think of just behaviors as tangible things. Can I program a computer? Can I use Outlook? Am I good in Excel? Can I perform well with public speaking? Those are just easy to imagine skills.
Yep.
But there are other skills that you might think of as personality traits, but I call them attitudinal skills. One was people skills. Okay, a person might think, well, if you're extroverted, you're good with people. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And we all know some people that come on too strong.
Yes.
They're too boisterous.
Yes.
All right. So there's nuance in reading a room. There's nuance in relating to a person and adjusting your demeanor, style, or language. Those are communication skills, presentation skills, emotional intelligence. Those are things where personality might help you in certain ways, but it will not make you a master in those domains. That takes practice. So certain things that people think of as natural attitudes, I see as social skills too. All right. Mm-hmm. And skills define workplace behaviors. All right. So to me, a behavior, not all behaviors are skills, but all skills are behaviors.
Not all behaviors are skills, but all skills are behaviors.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Listen, this is why I love this stuff. I'm fascinated because it is, I believe that terminology and, language matters. And, yes. I remember in one of the organizations I was working and we were using an assessment and one of the leaders, executive leaders, was saying, so what does the personality assessment say? And it said, it's not a personality assessment. And many times my answer was, we're not assessing all aspects of the individual, right. Only certain traits, and we're not asking questions about values. For example, what do you do if you steal if you find $100? But the conversation, many instances in companies that I've worked at, is personality assessment. Sure. Personality assessment.
It's in the public consciousness, Gustavo. When people think of psychology, if they remember anything from high school or college, it's personality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Almost anyone in today's day and age, if you're applying for any level of job, you're taking some form of a test that's probably described as a personality test, if only to make it easy for a person to understand. And people talk about personality traits or your personality profiling on Dr. Phil's show, in movies and TV, it's on the internet. So it's common everyday language. It's a colloquialism that is intended to encapsulate, oh, that's how you are as a person. Mm-hmm. But to an academic nerd like me, I'm the first one to say it, okay? Yeah. Personality means something very specific. And it's not the common everyday assumption that you are entirely what your personality says you are.
All right. So I wanted to take a moment, if you're okay with this. I'm playing around here with the settings from Zoom, but I wanted to actually share my assessment. And I wanted us to talk about it. I'm going to put it out there. Not worried about it. So let me
you shouldn't, because if I didn't make it clear before, that assessment was what, 2 years old?
2 years old.
Gustavo, this is you 2 years ago. This is not necessarily you today.
Got it. So
that's important. Okay. That's important to understand.
So are you able to see it right now on the screen, the assessment?
I can see the top third.
Okay. All right. So let's begin from the top, right? Yes. It says Gustavo Servia overall pattern is a thinker. How does the assessment, the psychometric assessment, comes down to a summary of saying he's a thinker?
Well, human beings are not hardwired to multitask. No matter what anyone tells you, human beings, the way our brains work, we don't like a bunch of information at once. We like a small group of information, little chunks. And because of that, the human mind is programmed to think in terms of categories. Some people don't like that because that gets into profiling and don't label me. But the fact is, the human mind loves labels, loves categories, because it makes the world much more manageable. It gives us a sense of control. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So to make things work with the way a human thinks, we also give a category as one part of the feedback on our psychometric assessment. Now, it's important for people to understand that our psychometric assessment was designed specifically for the service hospitality industry.
Got it.
It's not like a Myers-Briggs that's trying to be all things to all people. No. It's very clear on what it's doing. And it's looking at very particular success factors that predict workplace performance in service-driven settings or service-driven cultures. So if you scroll down towards the bottom of page 1 of your report, Gustavo, you're going to see that, remember I mentioned those 3 buckets of performance: how you go about your work, that's tactical skills; how you relate to other people, people skills; how you think and act on information, cognitive skills. Well, the reason why the assessment looked at you and said, I'm going to label Gustavo a thinker, is because your patterns suggest that first and foremost, you contemplate. You like to make sense of things. You want to learn. Okay, you care about accuracy. You're a very solution-focused person. I imagine people in the workplace, some 50% probably love you, 50% probably are annoyed by you. 50% that are positive thinkers, the glass is half full, they relate to you. But the people that are cynics, the people that are always challenging, the naysayers, they don't like you because you don't adopt that mindset. You're solution-focused. You're not problem-focused. So that's why the assessment, ours anyway, says, boy, out of all these patterns, there's one thing that seems to rise above and be a consistent theme. And that is Gustavo thinks about information. He thinks about how he relates to people. He thinks about how he's approaching a process or a system. You are a contemplative person that likes to do the right thing, not just the fast or easy thing.
So when I think on my career and talk about evolving, I was working in Arizona, and the general manager of the hotel, I was an assistant director at the time, pulled me into the office and said, Gustavo, you're great. I love working with you, but you have to make decisions. Make a decision, right? And I go, what do you mean? He says, exactly. Don't want you to mean, or don't, just make the decision. Collect the information and just go with it. And that's when I realized through that feedback that I'm a contemplator, right? I go, I think about the information. And in the workplace, I've had to adjust because I realize I will not always have necessarily all the facts. I want 100 facts, but I only got 15. I got to make a decision. Well, a decision has to be made based on 15, right? So, going back to my answer, of course, I've evolved because I've learned, wait, information was given to me. I'm analyzing the information. And if the information was given to me based on my profile, I got to do something with it versus rejecting it automatically. So when I looked at this, I was like, oh my God, this took me back to 2008 when Leo said to me, just make the decision. Don't worry about it. Make the decision. And here I am kind of, okay, but what if it's the wrong decision? He says, you won't make the wrong decision because you already think through it. It's just that you want to make it perfect, and sometimes you can't, right? So is that an example of what you're seeing there? Yeah.
No, yeah, it's there. No, absolutely. And you're now just demonstrating the difference between how a person is hardwired versus what they can become if they put some energy to it. Just because you're hardwired to naturally react or think a certain way doesn't mean that that's how you are set in stone. You could take that information and you can learn to be more efficient in your decision making. You can learn to adopt the 80-20 rule versus I only need 100% of the information all the time. And you should understand, though, that you also had a leader that was trying to push a certain corporate culture. Maybe that had to do with efficiencies and effectiveness. You could have gone to a different corporate environment that maybe very much valued contemplators. So again, people can change. They can adapt. What is a strength in one environment can be an Achilles heel in another. So I usually don't think of traits as a strength or a weakness. They're both sides of the same coin. And a person can learn to mitigate, to modify, to accommodate. So I don't buy into the notion that an old dog can't learn new tricks and that personality is what you should be measuring to make hiring and development discussions and decisions. No, you need to focus on what a person can do. And they almost always can do more than they think.
All right. So the 2020 assessment is broken down into the skills, right? The execution skills,
Yes.
The people skills and the cognitive. We talked a little bit about cognitive. I want to go into the execution skills.
Okay.
Obviously, you guys have ethical awareness, company loyalty, self-efficacy, service orientation. What does this section say about me?
Okay. Well, now you just rattled off those names of those subscales. Like, of course, you already know what they mean.
Yep.
But like we learned with personality, people might have a different understanding. Ethical awareness to me means something quite different to just a normal person you ask on the street. They're going to assume that means, are you ethical or not? Right? Are you honest or are you not? No. Ethical awareness really refers to process orientation. How rigid are you when it comes to rules, regulations, and process? There's not a value judgment, but there is a string, a continuum. And on one side of that bell curve of this string, you can be very rigid. In other words, you see situations as black or white, right or wrong, yes or no. And you look at the world in more cookie cutter terms. And there might be roles or corporate cultures where you need to be more thinking in the box. It is more rigid.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's the other side of that string or that spectrum where it doesn't mean you don't have rules, regulations, or process, but it means that you see the world not in black and white, but in shades of gray. You look at situations and you can appreciate nuances, idiosyncrasies, mitigating factors. And you don't take a cookie cutter approach because one size does not fit all. And it doesn't mean that you're less ethical, but it does mean you're a little bit more nimble and adaptable. And there are some roles where you want someone to be more like that. If I have a corporate lawyer or a CFO, I want them doing things by the book because you're talking about compliance and audit issues. But if I'm talking about sales and marketing and product development, I want someone more loosey-goosey. I want them thinking outside that proverbial box. You, on the other hand, don't score in either extreme. You're more in the middle. So you're not rigid, but you're also not just pivoting and bending with the wind. You're somebody that comes in a methodical way, but you're more like, well, you remember the 80s TV show MacGyver?
Yeah.
Right? The super spy that approached a situation and solved it, not using a set of just rigid principles, but looking in the environment. What do I have to work with? And he could improvise things out of chewing gum and paper clips, and he gets out of all the life-threatening situations. You're more like a MacGyver, Gustavo. You are not someone that's a pushover, and you're not a one-size-fits-all. You're that person that can bend with the wind. You can pivot. You're very resourceful because you're solution-focused. And that doesn't mean solving problems based on the ways that you always did in the past. If you can learn from something from the past and apply it to the present, that's great. But as you and I both know, oftentimes there's things that happen that disrupt our businesses and industries, like a pandemic.
Yeah.
And sometimes past precedents, what worked in the past does not work today.
Correct.
So you take the principle of, I'm going to solve the problem in the most resourceful way possible. If I can use what worked in the past, great. If not, I'm not going to get stuck. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to be adaptable. So you have that kind of a mentality.
Okay. Now, part of the challenge that I see, again, both as an HR practitioner, but also as a potential candidate, is once you complete an assessment, it is in the hands of the person reading and interpreting the results. I'm concerned when companies use assessment, particularly when they're using a rating scale, right, or a scoring system to kind of eliminate, right?
Yes.
And I get it. There's so many people applying. You have to figure out a way to filter down. The selection process is an imperfect process. I get it. You don't have the time and money to interview 250 candidates one at a time with an assessment, with a psychologist, and talking about it. I get it. But from your experience, let's talk about the candidate experience. What do candidates need to know about assessments whenever they are completing an assessment?
Well, in a way, and let me just say this as a preface, I think a lot of companies, their hearts are in the right place. They want to leverage science to make more informed decisions. And by that, I mean reduce the subjectivity in the screening and selection process. But unfortunately, they use them wrong, even if their heart is in the right place, because the pressures today, the talent, that war for talent, as they say, is so intense. The competition is so harsh that people are trying to be more streamlined.
Yeah.
And hurry up that process of screening and selection. And whether by design or by default, they cut corners, and that reduces the accuracy. And a lot of people actually give too much credence to the assessment. The assessment should just be one part of a broader due diligence program. Now, I know it adds time on to that front end.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to hear that. People want a silver bullet. They want to take a pill that just gives them the answer.
Yep.
And they think nowadays, given all the technology that we have, big data, artificial intelligence, certainly scientists can create some sort of an algorithm that does all that heavy lifting and deep thinking for them. And that is incorrect. Because no assessment, I don't care whether it's quantitative or qualitative, I don't care whether it's a psychometric assessment or an interview, no single piece of technology is going to know the corporate culture the way that a human being does. No single piece of technology is going to understand the nuances in the working dynamics of a corporate culture and a role. So unfortunately, the fact is, human beings, if you want to be accurate, you have to participate in the process. And another thing that psychologists have known for a long time is this, I call it a pit of quicksand that people get stuck in and then they drown, is this paradox. It's called the speed accuracy trade-off. And it doesn't matter what setting you apply this to, it seems to hold true. Human beings can do something fast or they can do it accurate. But typically, you don't get both at the same time. So what are you going to be? Do you want speed or do you want accuracy? And assessments can help make something faster, but there is no silver bullet, okay? And also, people use assessments incorrectly without even realizing it. They set up candidates for failure, because assessments to human beings means a test.
Yeah.
And scary words like assessment or psychometrics, test, it automatically puts a person back in high school or college, where a test means you're being evaluated, you're being judged, and there is a right or a wrong outcome. And that puts burden on a person to give the right answer. So people usually are not honest on assessments when they feel that they need to say the right thing to get the job. So usually companies do not adequately message and inform a candidate about the way that assessments are being used. They leave it ambiguous.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's scary because a person doesn't know what you're measuring, how to use the results. All they know is that's probably pretty important, because the first thing that the company did when they acknowledged that I got the application submitted was, oh, I have to take this test. Oh, goodness. So automatically, you've just introduced test anxiety, and automatically you just encourage the person to lie, to distort their answers because they want to get to the next level.
Yeah.
So they're going to try to say whatever they need to say to get to the next level. So you've already set up the outcome for failure on both sides.
Wow. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I've seen it firsthand. This idea of speed and accuracy it's all around, and businesses want to find that silver bullet that just doesn't exist. I find myself torn, because I personally look at assessments and I see the value. But I have to admit that as an HR practitioner, that accuracy speed paradox forces me to immediately put people in a particular hole based on the job that we're trying to fill, or based on the development path that we have determined is important for our company, right? Based on our culture, based on what we're trying to achieve. And from a candidate experience, look, I hate when I say that there's no right or wrong answer, but the reality is that there's a right answer, but that doesn't make you wrong. Meaning, what may be right for us may be wrong for you, and vice versa. But I just don't know how to tell a candidate look, you're going to complete an assessment, and we may decide based on the collective of information that you are not a fit for us. But keep in mind that as part of the selection process, companies do not give feedback. They don't share the assessment
No, they
with
don't.
people.
They neither set the stage to explain to a candidate what are we really measuring and why? How will the results be used? And they certainly don't close the loop and give a person feedback. So it's anxiety at the beginning, and it's even more anxiety at the end, especially if they don't make the cut.
Yeah.
But actually, this isn't hard, okay? And this goes into the whole notion of people skills and emotional intelligence. It's a very simple way to make this whole process easier for test takers and actually more accurate. And that is, you flip the script. First, you never call it a test or an assessment or psychometrics. You call it a questionnaire or a survey. Mm-hmm. Everyone has taken a questionnaire or a survey, and that's not judgmental. If anything, it's asking your opinions. It's asking for your important feedback and viewpoints on things. So instead of what matters to the company, it's more about now what matters to the candidate. And instead of saying, oh, you're not a fit with us, I'd flip the script. I would say, look, as part of our, we are very much concerned about having every person be happy here. It's about a two-way fit. It's not just about what you bring to us. We want to make sure we're the right platform and environment for you, because we don't want you leaving. We want you happy with us. We want you productive. We want you to have a home. So rather than say something like, wow, you weren't a fit, I would say, look, hey, this process is as much for you as for us.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that you are happy, that we are a fit to you. I would always frame it in terms of the perspective of the candidate, not the other way around. And that's the way that I usually message. It's, wow, you scored exactly the way that you should. It gives us a sense of your preferences, your motivations, and your approach to professional situations. And your approach, I can tell by our patterns that you probably are not going to be happy here. You're probably going to be very dissatisfied, demotivated. We're not a fit for you. And we want you to have been happy.
Yeah.
So I would have flipped the script a bit. It's a simple little bit of emotional intelligence, but messaging, a little switch in messaging can make all the difference.
I think that would be worth exploring. You know, as an HR professional, I would love to work in an environment that has a greater level of transparency, and that good, bad, or indifferent gives you more transparency about the process and
Yes.
what that decision looked like. Because look, it is frustrating on the candidate side. You're trying to find a job if you're unemployed, or you're trying to make a career change, or you're not happy where you are at, and then you're applying out there. They ask you to take one of these surveys or questionnaires or assessments, and then you don't hear anything. All you get is an email that says, thank you, but no thank you. But I know that companies are afraid. They're afraid of being at this level of transparency. And I would love to be part of an organization that pushes towards that level of transparency and looks for ways to elevate not only the people that they're selecting, but the people that they're attracting, that even if they don't hire them, they're able to have a transparent conversation. I know that a lot of people that are going to watch us are going to say, yeah, right, it's not going to happen. No HR department wants to give you feedback because they don't want to be in a lawsuit.
Right.
But I still think that there's a way. I still need to process what that would look like, because what you just articulated to me makes sense. And I think there's value in that, not only in terms of the individual, but now the individual is walking away feeling better. And he's probably going to tell others, you should consider that company, because that company is going to be transparent with you.
You better believe it. That candidate, if they go away unhappy, feel like they've been disrespected, if not downright treated poorly, you better believe their next stop is Facebook, Twitter, Glassdoor. They're going to tell other people. So that customer experience is a candidate experience, and vice versa. So
talking about, fit. So you're familiar
Yes.
with the Predictive Index.
Of course.
So I took the Predictive Index a few times, and one of the instances, the practitioner that was reading it said, there's 3 graphs, and he said to me, this is your first graph, right? And it says what it says. And this is your second graph. And he said, your first graph is describing somebody that is trying to behave and be something that you're not. And he said, be careful because that's not sustainable. In other words, you're trying to be something for people that deep down you're not it. And
Right.
at some point, you're going to get tired. You're going to be exhausted. And that, I have to admit, played in my mind because most people that know me would say Gustavo is an extrovert. I call it, maybe I'm wrong. I call it, I have a switch. I know when I have to turn it on. I know when I have to turn it off, right? But frankly, if you ask me to go to a party and I don't know people, I don't want to go. It's just not my thing to hang out. But if you tell my wife, even if she doesn't know anybody, she's going to go and she's going to be mingling. If I end up going, I'm going to be in the corner, sitting down, talking to nobody unless somebody sits next to me. And at that moment I go, okay, let me engage in conversation. But how much of an employer selection in that fit, because it goes back to what you said about the candidates trying to respond to assessments,
Yes.
thinking of what the company wants to hear. And from that conversation, I said, you know what, whenever I encounter these, I'm going to answer based on who I am. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, move on, right? I'm not interested. But that's maturity kicking in and maturity saying, listen, I know not everybody's going to like me. I'm okay with that. But if somehow I now have to fake it to get this job, I'm not interested. There are candidates out there that are figuring out a way to try to make, cheat the test. Is it worth it? Is it valuable in doing that? Is there value?
If you ask me, no.
Yeah.
You're just sabotaging your own happiness and success. But again, you hit on a very good point. I mean, I'm the same way. People think I'm an extrovert because they usually see me at a conference, I'm doing a panel or a breakout session or things like this where you're talking and you're having a good time. But I'm an introvert. So if I act extroverted, you just had someone tell you that you're not authentic. That's the message they gave to you, that you're faking.
Yep.
Whereas, whoa, if you take a standpoint of a behavior, you don't give a judgment to it. I could see that as a strength. Being inauthentic, being fake is not a positive, right? No one wants to be that.
Correct.
But if you said, wow, you're very good at adapting to social circumstances and adjusting your messaging to match the audience, rather than expecting the audience to understand you. That I see as a positive skill. So, that's one of the reasons why I don't like certain tests.
Yep.
Because not only do they measure, in my opinion, the wrong thing, they also put value judgments in ways that they're not qualified to make.
And that's my concern. How employers use these, right? Either as a pass-fail with no context, no conversations around it. They take it and they say, okay, tell me, should I hire this person or not? Did they pass? Did they fail? And I think there's more nuance than that.
Oh my God. Yeah, of course there is. Now, you certainly can use assessments to help you screen out certain people. I'm all favor of that.
Got it.
But there's a way that you have to do that. And it can't just be, my gut feel says, or I don't like this pattern. You do an empirical or a quantitative benchmarking exercise. You can administer assessment to a set of high performers and low performers. Some people even include a middle group of, average performers or they're good. They're not going to aspire to anything more, but I wouldn't get rid of them. And they serve a purpose.
Yep.
And you look for psychometric patterns that distinguish each group. Now, usually those are not hard and fast recipes. Just like everything else in physics and science, there's tolerance levels. If somebody scores between X and Y, yes, they're within a range of variables that define success, average performance, or low performance. So it's not a, yes, you have it, no, you don't, but to what extent do you fit? It's the same principle like they use in online dating with compatibility testing. It's not that you're not compatible or you are, it's the degree to which you're compatible. Well, you have the same thing here, the degree to which you fit a corporate culture, okay? So if you can do an empirical benchmarking exercise, you can certainly compare an applicant's results to the tolerance levels of the three groups. And if they seem to be clearly not a fit, they are so out of bounds that it's probably unlikely going to be a fit for them, and it's probably a waste of time for you to go to the interviewing stage, then by all means you can screen those people out. Now, it needs to be done in a respectful way that closes the loop, because that's now a customer. They may not be an employee, but they are a customer. But I wouldn't just hire someone just because they also score in a way that seems to mathematically be in the same ballpark as your high performers. That only loads the dice for success. And then you want to make sure that that person is a fit by doing corroboration. That's when you bring them in to do structured behavioral interviewing and proper reference checking. And then if those two pieces corroborate the science, the statistical models, then you've really loaded the dice for a successful match. And that's a two-way fit, where the person will also like the environment they're coming into. It's not just do they have the skills to do what you want them to.
So, you know, when I completed a course a couple of years ago on, the selection process and how analytics and statistics are being used, and they rank the different type of selections and, interviews, tests, etc. And they put at the bottom, obviously, I think it was a 0.26 reliability on normal interviewing, right? Which you have a greater chance of hiring better by just flipping the coin than by doing non-structured interviews. And that to me was eye-opening, because here we are, 4 or 5 people interviewing, and we all think we're all experts. And when you look at the data says, hold on, unstructured, opinion-based type of interviewing is not going to help you, right? And then you have other things like questionnaires, on the job testing, structured interviewing. So if you were to put what would be a thought out selection process for an organization, what it would look like?
Well, Lou, first let me make the comment that the study you're referring to, it's several years old, but it's still germane today. And yes, most people do an unstructured interview, which is the equivalent of speed dating. You're only going to get a sense of whether you like the person.
That's right. That's right.
And you relate to them. Are they like you? And if they pass those, I like this person test, then you assume that, oh, they're a high performer.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So that's always inaccurate.
Yeah.
Right. So structured interview is when you are taking a person through a set of questions that are asking about situation-specific attitudes or behaviors. Usually they start with the common phrase, tell me about a time when you had to mediate conflict between us 2 employees. Tell me about a time when you had to put together a strat plan, yet you didn't have all the information you would like, and the stakeholders are putting pressure to get that sooner rather than later. You're asking someone to recount an actual time where they demonstrated a skill or ability.
Yeah.
And notice, if they give you that information, that's black and white. They're saying that they did something or not. You can cross-check that with reference checking, okay? That's quite different than saying, what's your approach to leadership? What's your management style? And they can give some very theoretical, flowery language. It doesn't mean anything because it didn't demonstrate a before, a beginning, and after.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it.
So there is a process of using structured interviewing, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't learned this simple system, Google it or go to YouTube and you can see videos on this, but it's called the STAR method, S-T-A-R. And it's also taught to people that are being interviewed. When you phrase an answer, use the STAR method, where you present a situation. You talk about the task that was necessary, the achievement, what was met, and then the results. So what was the situation? What was the task needed? What was your approach? And what were the results? So that's very black and white. A person either demonstrates ability or they flub it. And you will know right away if someone's making it up or whether they have very clear examples and recent examples of their abilities in problem solving, team building, leadership, or tactical abilities. So I always recommend people do a standard assessment, a standardized assessment, not a personality test, And certainly not an assessment that says, wow, how do you see yourself? Because those assessments, and I'm sorry, Predictive Index does this to an extent, Myers-Briggs does this, but it's what they call a self-referential exercise. It's basically a mirror. It asks you, how do you see yourself? And if I'm given that sort of exercise, I'm going to say, well, I'm charming and handsome. And then when the assessment comes back, the report, it says, well, Dr. Jim is charming and handsome. My goodness, it's the most accurate test I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
But it's only giving a mirror. It only echoes how a person sees themselves. That's usually not a match with reality. So instead, a standardized assessment does two things. One, it compares a person to a benchmark, an independent control group or a peer group. So instead of seeing if you think you're the smartest person in the room, they actually compare your abilities to a reference group. So now you're being plotted and compared in an objective way, not a subjective way. And just to put the point in that, drive that point home, great standardized assessments, the ones that have the strongest reliability and validity, and the ones that are also legally defensible against bias and prejudice, so critical in today's day and age, okay? A lot of reasons why companies don't use assessments, as you said, they don't want to open themselves up to lawsuits about being biased.
Yeah,
and assessments have implicit bias.
Yeah.
One of the techniques that they use to give both a standardized assessment, strong reliability and validity, and defensibility against bias is something called modern test theory. People can go to Wikipedia and type in modern test theory. They're going to be bored. It's very nerdy, very complex mathematics, but it's those mathematics that they use in the real world. They use it with accreditation testing, achievement testing, IQ testing. You've been through it already. If you ever take it an LSAT, an ACT, a GMAT, you went through an assessment, a psychometric test that was built using modern test theory statistics.
Got it.
Most other assessments on the market use something called classical test theory. And the name itself makes it sound old, classical test theory. We've known it's been outdated since 1960. So if you're using an assessment that has not been updated in its psychometrics since 1960, not only are you not going to get the right results, you're opening yourself up to legal risk.
Oh, wow. So obviously, this is a fascinating topic. I appreciate very much you coming out. I'm passionate about these type of tools, but I'm also worried how employers are using them because you can create damage when you may not create as much damage for the person that you don't hire, but if you're using these as a development tool and you're not trained on how to use them, how to interpret them, how to coach someone, now you may be giving someone the wrong weapon and can use it against that particular employee. But I've been fascinated with them and certainly appreciate you taking the time of reading a little bit of mine to use it as an example. In closing, obviously there's no silver bullet. The best selection process, it's a combination of reference checking, structure interviewing, questionnaires such as the 2020. What else do you want to share in closing for employers to learn and know about improving their selection process?
They need to take it seriously. They need to get over this. I understand the desire to get a result fast. You have to do a little work on the front end to avoid pain and heartache on the backside of the equation.
Yeah.
Okay. Bad hires are very expensive. Even for low-level hires, a failed hire can cost the equivalent of 6 times that person's salary. Okay. So you need to get it right, especially in today's day and age where talent is at a premium. There's high competition for talent. So if you're going to invest in an assessment, make sure it's part of a broader due diligence process. Learn that process, be consistent with it, then you will see actual business value. Otherwise, it'd be better you don't use it at all.
Jim, in closing, I always give the opportunity to the guests to, pitch anything that they're working on. They can talk about their company, any upcoming webinars or anything that they're doing. The floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate that. Next month, I'm going to be doing a webinar on some new psychometrics over high performers at line levels for the Sea Trade Conference, the big cruise industry conference. And even though that's just for cruise, it obviously applies to all sorts of service hospitality settings. But I encourage people to read more about psychometrics and assessment and how it ties into leadership issues and management philosophies by just going to our website. It's Aethos, AETHOSCG.com. And you can get alerts on new upcoming articles and our new research all the time. And of course, you can get my contact information. And just like you and I had a chat today, I invite anyone to call me and have a chat. I'm not there to sell them, I'm there to educate them.
Beautiful. I've always enjoyed my conversations with you because you're thorough, you're concise, and you are educating. Send me the link about the conference so that I can also share it with my network. But again, I appreciate very much you joining me. Thank you very much, and we'll remain in touch.
Thank you.
Take care, Jim. Bye-bye.